Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for allowing me to moderate this panel. It's a pleasure to be moderating a panel with such distinguished speakers. We have very limited time, and I want you all to shine in your own right. You certainly have a lot more to offer to the audience. Our goal here is to make the discussion engaging and lively, and ask real questions that are practical questions that matter most versus theoretical and academic. So that means we may have a few challenging and contradictory or conflicting questions to ask. And I have previously cleared with our distinguished speakers, and they're not afraid to take these challenging questions. I hope that this discussion will be informative, insightful, and engaging. With that, so the topic today is the license to comply, regulatory occurrence in motion. What does it really mean? It sounds a little stiff and a bit academic, but ultimately what we want to talk about is the UAE's regulatory system, regulatory framework, and what is it, how old it is, and why is it evolving so fast, and in particular the VARA 2.0. Rulebook, which was updated in just less than 2 years. And so perhaps we will start with Abdulatif, because obviously something was missing in the rulebook. And so, by the way, I will actually, before we move on to the questions, I can introduce the speakers myself, but I think it's much more effective if they introduce themselves. So why don't we first introduce ourselves, and ultimately from the perspective of the commentary, we've got the regulator, we've got the operator, and we've got the legal advisor and sort of cross-border expert. So we'll have a very diverse views. And now with that, if I may please pass it on to you and let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Paul Boots. Good afternoon, everyone. I look after sector development on behalf of VARA. So within our role as a regulator, we issue regulation, we implement that regulation, we enforce on that regulation, but we are also an entity that was set up to help grow Dubai's economy. And that's very much kind of within my mandate to deal with all the different stakeholders from the industry to make sure that Dubai can be a very good home, if not the largest and best center for the virtual asset industry.
Thank you. Latif.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Abdulatif, the head of compliance in Equity Securities Broker, Currencies Broker LLC. I think I would thank you for allowing me to participate in such a panel. It's insightful and hope to deliver the target of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Samir Safar Ali. I am head of FinTech and Financial Services Regulation for the Middle East at PwC Legal. I've been here in the UAE and the region for coming up to 13 years now, and cover all regulatory issues from investigations to licensing, conduct, product. So it's a pleasure to be with such distinguished speakers and moderator today. And thank you to IFX.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to frame our discussion today a little bit as well, because from two different perspectives. One is although we've got a very distinguished speaker here from VARA really, as you rightfully said, only applies in Dubai. So we are actually here reporting from the UAE. So one of the discussions we want to focus on is the various regulators that exist in the UAE, and ultimately what the country, not just Dubai, what does the UAE as a country, so what image does the UAE want to portray to the rest of the world? Because from our experience where we sit, and we have a law practice, so we see a lot of sort of boots on the ground experience of clients, and a lot of people come here to the UAE thinking it's a very friendly virtual asset / crypto jurisdiction. So that means, for a lot of people, friendly means easy. As a result, as we call them, there's a lot of these crypto cowboys or crypto enthusiasts who come to the UAE thinking it's kind of wild east. They can set up a crypto business without actually having a license. What we want to talk about today is that's obviously not what the UAE means by friendly. The UAE's friendliness comes not from making it easy, but rather from having a developed regulatory framework to attract the right kind of crypto virtual asset business providers. Why don't we start with Abdulatif from the operational side of things in compliance. So compliance is obviously your area of expertise. Why did you think that VARA needed to update the rule book in just 2 years, what gap or what kind of inconsistencies existed in the rule book that required or mandated the update?
So, well, I don't want to speak on behalf of the regulator as long as the regulator is here. So, from my perspective, like as you said, it's operational aspect. I don't see it's just like a huge gap. It's just like kind of differentiation between the market itself, between the firms, like in terms of the leverages, in terms of the collateral itself. So it's good to see after 2 years the update of the regulation. By looking after all the governance that it should be in place when it will, the volatile market, it will affect the client protection. So this kind of aspects, the regulators overall, they look at it. The normal life cycle of any regulation will be changed. It will be like, let's say 5 years, as we see between the regulation overall around the world. But VARA, they took an advantage by looking after the market, targeting to make UAE just like a business hub for the industry. That's what I look at it. I don't see it's a gap instead of just like, yeah, establishing. So if we'll consider at the time, like the version 1, let's say, the previous rule book, it was at the time of evolving the market. It's just like establishing the principles. But when the volatility it became obvious, so we need to take an action on behalf, like from a regulator perspective. That's what I see it.
But from the operational side of things, did you feel compliance was not sufficient, or I mean, where was?
To look after like the concept of how each entity they will look after the compliance. Is it the traditional compliance or the what's the regulator wants from us? So the regulator look at it in terms of the market and the economic aspect of each activity, how it will impact the industry. So based on that, they will change the regulation in a way or another. But when it comes to the firms itself, they should be adapt what the regulator wants, even if they are not clearly mentioned this, because there is always in the regulation there is something behind or the purpose why the regulator they meant on this article in this regulation or not.
And what did the regulator want?
Yeah, so, and maybe to take a step back on that topic, right? So when VARA was originally set up, we issued regulations so that from a Dubai point of view, we could enable the growth of an industry in a responsible way. However, that industry that we're focused on is an extremely innovative industry. Things constantly change, things constantly move. Now, originally, we dealt with that by making our regulations and our rules principles-based. So we regulate activity, we don't regulate product or technology, and that already really helped us kind of get ahead of the pack, if you will, with regards to the jurisdiction here, because entities can come here, and once they go through the licensing process, they can operate in the way that they see fit within the guidelines and within the rules that we have. That doesn't mean that the industry doesn't keep moving. And if you look at the update that we did, some of it is, you know, you have an initial version, there's some things in there where you get feedback from the market that small changes need to happen. But the bigger change was actually us reacting to the innovation happening in the market. Topics such as real-world asset tokenization, these kind of things, we ran a number of pilots with licensed entities to enable them to do business, to allow them to test this in the real world with guardrails, and then we translated that into the new rule books. And so by us updating those rule books, it basically just means, okay, we've learned from what's happening, we've had an opinion on it, on how we can enable that in a responsible way and let companies operate. And actually, not too long from now, we're going to update our rule books again with regards to other innovation that's happening in the industry. So that process never stops.
And that's very typical of Dubai as well, or the UAE in general. It reacts fast, it introduces regulations and kind of lets the market develop or take it forward, and then it updates and continues to progress. And so, Samir, you are in law, and obviously you work a lot with the regulators and across different jurisdictions. So how do you compare what's happening in the UAE, in particular with in connection with the development of our regulatory system and the laws that are being changed and evolved on a regular basis with other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look at the region, the UAE was in the form of ADGM back in, I think, 2018, January, right? Was the first ever regulator in the region to issue any guidance on virtual assets, aligned with FINMA in Switzerland and Monetary Authority in Singapore. So in terms of identifying this sector as a key economic contributor towards GDP, in terms of attracting talent, and in terms of embedded finance, I think it always leads by example. And there are other areas of the economy where it does the same. So, we are, I think we were talking earlier on, and Paul used the phrase alphabet soup, right? When it comes to the numerous different regulators we have in the region. That aside, I think we are really fortunate in the UAE across the different regulators, VARA, FSRA in ADGM, DFSA in DIFC, and now the Capital Markets Authority for the rest of the territory. I think we have proactive regulators that are looking to really engage with the principles and the risks related to the different products and services in this sector. When we look at the wider region, we see it's a mixed bag in terms of, and it's all set by economic and financial sector priorities. So in some countries we have CBDC pilots, and we don't have anything with regards to virtual asset regulation. We don't have anything in the VASP space yet, but we see a focus in some countries on security tokens. Qatar is a good example of that with the QFC. Saudi CMA is looking at that as well. Central Bank of Bahrain is also another regulator in the region that was very early in the game in terms of issuing a whole volume. The way they do their stuff is they have different volumes of the rulebook for different activities, and they issued a whole volume for fintech, and in that was virtual assets. So we have a mixed bag in the region. Oman, of course, now has the Oman FSA, used to be the CMA, and they have virtual asset regulations as well. So it's a mixed bag depending on economic priorities.
So Samira, you mentioned earlier that you, in your capacity, you also consult or provide legal guidance to the various regulatory authorities, including VARA, from what I understand, or at least other similar regulatory authorities in terms of, I guess, legislation and evolution and progression. So the question to all of you, in particular Paul, let's start with Paul, where do you draw your inspiration? Is there a role model that you follow? Are there some specific jurisdictions, Samira, that you look at and try to bring examples as role models? There's compliance that you learn from the operators, from the actual the boots on the ground. Where do you draw inspiration? Or are we setting the new standard and others are drawing inspiration from us?
Well, so if you look at the origin of VARA, we tried to look around in those days to say, if Dubai wants to attract digital economy, if Dubai wants within that digital economy to attract the virtual asset industry, how can we regulate that? And actually, the Department of Economy and Tourism started to look around and say, what are other regulators doing? What can we learn? Where can we take inspiration from? In those days, and now we're talking 2022, give or take, there was not much out there. So then actually the decision was taken, okay, let's just do it ourselves, but let's surround ourselves with very smart people, with very smart advisors, and set the benchmark for regulation in this industry. Where do we take our inspiration from now? It's the market. We have licensed over 40 companies now. We have another 10 to 15 that are in principle approved, so they will be operational very soon. We interact with them very regularly. They come to us with what they need. Believe me, because they want to grow their business. So that helps us. And then we have started to build extremely strong relationships with the global regulators that are now all in one way or another starting to look at this industry. And we're working closely with them to share knowledge, to share experiences, and to understand how we can take this industry forward in the right way. But it comes from lots of different areas. There is no, individual kind of entity that we can copy. Those days are not here. This is too early stage.
But there is a country or two or three that we look up to. Samir, I mean, you work a lot cross jurisdiction. So is there one country that is the leader in the space?
I mean, look, historically, when we didn't have any regulation in this space, some of the first regulators back in 2016, 15, that had the courage to look at this and engage with the risk and then understand the technology was FINMA in Switzerland and Monetary Authority of Singapore. But now that we are almost 10 years in, trust me, when I speak to regulators in Africa, in Central Asia, even very close in Pakistan, for example, right? Dubai and the other jurisdictions in the UAE are really itself becoming a golden global standard. I mean, it's worth noticing that most regulators around the world are capital markets and security sector regulators that then try to adopt their framework for applying it to this new asset class, virtual assets. But VARA is the first dedicated virtual asset sector regulator. I mean, when you talk to, I won't pick them out, but when you talk to some of the European regulators, you really understand that there is a gap in understanding the risks relevant to the technology. And sometimes you'll find regulatory frameworks, and then you'll say, okay, let's take Web3, right? You need to approve the token and categorize the token and get it approved by the regulator before you can then invest in it. By the time you've done that, by the time you even fill out the application form, the opportunity is gone, right? So now we're seeing responsibility for the licensees to do that assessment, and that the regulators can then ask at any time, can we see your assessment to ease that those business friction. And we got the Pakistan VARA now as well, which has, a lot of the rules are they look like they've learned from the developments that we've had in the UAE, and other regulators in Far East as well also coming online. So,
Latif.
Actually, there is not an issue to look at the standards. Why you are calling it a standards? It's fine to apply the standards. We will not call to anything standards unless it's based on theory and it was proven that the best practice. So applying this standard, it's fine. And adding the purpose of publishing or issuing any new regulation, because in UAE the regulations published as a participants of the economy of this country, because this country, it has a specific nature that we look at it, as I said a bit earlier, it will be economic hub of the industry. So for that, the regulation here, it's coming standards, as Samir said, to other countries.
Okay, well, talking about standards and regulations or regulators, my second set of questions is all about the number of regulators. I mean, in the UAE, in this space, in the virtual asset space, we've got VARA, we've got ADGM, we've got DIFC, we've got Central Bank. I think Ras Al Khaimah also has its own digital RAC Oasis. There's ESCA. These are all sort of regulators of sorts in the same space. So is there maybe a little too many regulators, or is there going to be some sort of consolidation? Is consolidation necessary? Is there alignment amongst all these regulators? And is this normal to have so many regulators in such a, I guess it's a very vibrant space, but it's not a very huge space?
So it comes down to the UAE offering solutions for different kinds of companies, right? So as a country, we're trying to attract business from abroad, very much so. And not all of those companies are going to have the same requirements. They're not all going to have the same ideas on how to run their business. Maybe I'll explain a bit how we see the regulatory map in the UAE. So when you look at virtual assets, and I can mention the cabinet resolutions, but basically there was a cabinet resolution that stipulated that ESCA, or now Capital Markets Authority, is responsible for regulating virtual assets across the UAE. Immediately after that cabinet resolution, another cabinet resolution was issued to make VARA the authority for virtual assets in Dubai. So effectively giving the capital market authorities a mandate to VARA for the Emirate of Dubai. And then we talk about, okay, now we've got all of mainland covered between two regulators. Now, Capital Market Authority is also regulating TradFi, is also regulating traditional financial markets. VARA, and that was, from a strategic point of view, was set up specifically for the industry. To be fast mover, to get rules in place, to deal with the over 1,000 entities that were already operating here, to make sure that the market can grow, but it can start to grow in a really responsible way. And we start to get, you mentioned the word cowboys earlier, we start to get these kind of entities out of there. You then still have indeed several other entities. So you have central bank. Now, central bank looks after all the responsibilities of what a typical central bank would do, including payments and the sorts, which is a very distinct area. The last part that I will mention is you then have two financial free zones in the UAE. And those are their own jurisdictions. Those are also jurisdictions and free zones that were set up to attract companies that want to operate here from abroad in a legal framework that they might be more familiar with than our onshore laws, but really to service customers outside. So those jurisdictions are there, they have their value proposition, and companies who are coming to the region need to understand, in a way, what is best for their company, what kind of customers do they want to attract, where do they want to operate from, and based on that it will determine who their regulator is going to be. In addition to that, you have entities that will help you and that are authorities, but they are not regulators. And you mentioned, for instance, Ras Al Khaimah, but also all of the free zone authorities here in Dubai and so on. We work very closely with the ones in Dubai, and we have daily, or if not weekly interactions with them around companies that are being set up there that then need to be licensed by us. So from a VARA point of view, we look at all of the mainland of Dubai. You have ESCA, who looks at all of the mainland of the rest of the UAE, and then you've got your two financial free zones, all of which have a different value proposition.
Okay, and Latif, from the business side of things, does that present any challenges? There's so many regulators, so many licenses, so many different levels of authorities.
Actually, for any new business line or any new established business, they will look after each regulator. What's my business plan? Which regulator it can fit my business plan? And this is the variety. Actually, it helps the industry and the firms to decide where to establish their business line in case it's established now, or if it's a new established, they will look after the financial free zone or after the mainland. So this is the purpose of getting varieties of one like product, and it's separated between many regulators.
It's also, maybe just to jump in, there's a lot of cooperation happening between all these regulators, right? So we've signed MOUs with all of them. For instance, with our MOU with the Capital Markets Authority covers the fact that if you are an entity operating from Dubai, licensed by VARA, you can work with customers from all over the UAE. So if you want to onboard customers from Ras Al Khaimah or from Abu Dhabi, you don't need to necessarily set up another entity in those Emirates for you to be able to onboard those customers. So we have very clear agreements of passportability, if you want to use that word, between ourselves and the Capital Markets Authority to give clear guidance to companies. Okay, if you have a company in Dubai, you're licensed by VARA, you can service customers across the UAE. Now, if you then decide to set up an office in Abu Dhabi, that entity and that office will then be also licensed by Capital Markets Authority.
And thank you. And Samir, from the client's perspective or from the VASP perspective, is this a sort of multi-tiered system, more bureaucratic, more administratively challenging, more costly? What do your clients, what's the word from the street?
Clients come to us for clarity, right? So I think every single day I'm having a conversation where I'm explaining, you know, these are the purview of VARA versus central bank versus the CMA, what used to be ESCA, and the financial free zones. And like what Paul said, it all, you know, it's chiefly driven by the product. It's chiefly driven by the product. It's driven by the audience, the market, and also, you know, the internal mechanics of, you know, if we're talking about leverage, then we say, okay, which regime is more favorable or more is more tailored to my audience, right? So it's a conversation that it needs to be had. But I think some of the with what you said in terms of the UAE and being a crypto-friendly or virtual asset-friendly jurisdiction and what it means to be a friendly jurisdiction, right? There are some challenges, and actually, I think one of the challenges is with understanding what does it mean to be regulated. Because the amount of times that you'll talk to people and they say, I thought that this was a friendly zone. Why is there so many regulations? And I often point to the example, usually you're sitting on a coffee table or something like this, sitting around a coffee table. I point to even like water, right? If you pick up any bottle of water, you will see that there's a little mark. And that mark is from the Emirates Meteorology and Standardization Organization, NB-0002, something like that, right? And that allows a company to be able to sell water, right? So that you can say it is safe to drink. Now, if something as simple as water needs compliance and regulation, now we're talking about people's money, people's capital. Giving a license to an institution to be able to utilize economic opportunities, utilize people's savings and capital for economic activity. And that comes with responsibility. So, yeah.
Okay, so mindful of the time, we only have 2.5 minutes, and I just sort of kept the last question, okay, the best question for last, and that's about banking, and in particular traditional banks. So obviously, all this we're talking about doesn't really make much sense if banking is not available to all these VASPs, all the crypto enthusiasts, and at present, I guess I'll leave it to all of you. You can pick who wants to go first. But what's the relationship these days between the traditional banking industry and the virtual asset space? Because from what we see, the banks are still quite reluctant or resistant to operate with anything that has a C word or a C letter in it, as our clients say.
That is indeed a challenge. It's a challenge that this industry has. This industry is not unique in that. I mean, if you think about banking, again, they play a very important role. They have a lot of risk and compliance standards and so on. In a previous career, I looked after building Dubai for the diamond industry, and we had similar issues. We will see the banks coming on board more and more. The discussions that we're having with the banks, they are starting to open up to it. There is a lot of local banks that are exploring it, that have already kind of dipped their toes in, and they will. You can see that they see the commercial opportunity, they can see the benefit that it has, and that they are working towards it. But it's not an easy one for them to solve because it's just completely new. Where we as VARA see our role very much is how can we help educate the banks? How can we work with their risk teams, with their compliance teams, with every single level of the bank to get them comfortable with, first of all, what VARA does and all the checks and balances that we have and the reporting obligations that the companies have, so that they can become more comfortable in saying yes. But that's not a process that's going to go overnight. It's just going to take time.
Of course. Gentlemen, you too?
In terms of banking, there's still an conservative culture, the old culture that it's in the banking system. It's not yet changed like the other financial institutions, like moving fast, looking after all the kind of regulation and how they can use the regulation to grow their business. Still, they are slow a little bit to change, sorry to say that. But in the same time, talking about the culture of the banking system, it's kind of, they will look after a little bit complicated product. They will look after uncontrolled product, and in addition to the governance system that they have, there is compliance, as you said. It will be difficult for the time being, but when the banks will become relaxed with the regulator, as Paul said, it will be more optimistic to open to this industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Samir?
Yeah, very briefly, I think with the banks, there's two things. One is an educational piece, and the other is a technical piece. So the educational piece is, does the compliance officer or the MLRO officer firstly understand blockchain technology. And there are some good players in the market that are way ahead of what we would expect, and there's some who probably haven't even started the journey yet. So I think education is key, and I think a conduit to help that faster is that under Central Bank of UAE regulation, there's a need for compliance officers and actually all regulated functions to remain fit and proper. Now, fit and proper has a standard objective criteria, but it also has fit and proper with regards to understanding the risks in the market for the bank and what's required of their role. So I think in light of the move to the digital economy, maybe there can be something to explore there in terms of almost requiring basic blockchain technology and education. And the technical part, because why are they stopping it other than maybe not understanding it, is how to comply with UAE AML law. The UAE AML law was amended in 2021, although a new version has come out just last year. But the 2021 version included VASPs fully within the UAE AML framework. But then now we have to understand how do we, are we satisfied with the travel rule implementation? That's another conversation for another time probably. But, so these technical elements of AML law to help unlock some of those opportunities. But
exactly,
it's developing.
Yeah. One more thing, just want to add on Samir's statement, if you will dive further in terms of the technology related to the virtual assets, you will find you are protected and you are tracing a couple of aspects you missing it in other industries. So the knowledge fit and proper, it's something we can rely on it while you are choosing our MLROs and compliance officers.
Very good. But to leave it on an optimistic note, so VARA is aware of what should we call it, challenges that the industry faces with the traditional banking and is working on it. So soon enough, inshallah, just like with the diamond industry, yes, and the friendship will establish between the two industries. Okay.
And we're always here to listen.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this panel. Thanks very much for esteemed speakers.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mudir.